Welcome to Let Me Take You Higher, the podcast. I'm Mr. Villain, your host. Today I'll be joined by GiGi Luigi, my co-host, and a proud third-generation Italian-American. Today, on our Higher Point segment, we're diving deep into one of America's most persistent and destructive issues, racism. Through progress has been made, racism remains an insidious force that continues to undermine our nation. Like a tree with a rotting core, the damage often goes unseen, but affects everything around it. In this episode, we'll explore the roots of racism, the costs and consequences, and whether confronting this issue openly is the only way forward. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Let Me Take You Higher, the podcast.
A dream deferred, a fire inside, rotting roots that we can't hide. Roots of division, tangled in deep, wounds that we promise never to keep. We say we moved on, but still here we stand, trying to grow on poison land. But hearts stay cold. Stories of hate too long untold. Injustice lingers, thick as smoke. A silent pain, a bitter choke. Roots of division, tangled in deep, wounds that we promise never to keep. We say we moved on, but still here we stand, trying to grow on poison land. Applause were past, but hearts stayed cold. Stories of hate too long untold. Injustice lingers, thick as smoke. A silent pain, a bitter choke. Roots of division, tangled in deep, wounds that we promise never to keep. We say we moved on, but still here we stand, trying to grow on poison land. Roots of the face, our darkest part, to tear the rot out from our heart. A choice to heal, a path to find, or stay entangled, trapped, confined. Roots of division, tangled in deep, wounds that we promised never to keep. We say we've moved on, but still here we stand, trying to grow on poison land. Roots of division, we sever or mend. In the echoes of history, our voices blend. With courage to dig, to see and to clear, together we'll rise, a future sincere.
And welcome back to Let Me Take You Higher, the podcast. My name is Mr. Villain, and alongside me as always is GiGi Luigi. Hey GiGi, are you there?
Oh yeah, I'm always here. You know me.
I know you.
It's a me.
It's a me. It's a GiGi. So that's so, and it's a good thing we're talking about racism because that was like really racist, and I
It's
apologize.
fine.
Yeah,
it's fine.
Okay. But with that being said,
hold on though. Is it racist against Japanese people or Italians?
Well, I think it's Italians. Because I'm not talking about the new Italians, not the new mobster kind of Italians. I'm talking about the old Italians who made the pizzas, in the brick ovens. Those ones. Anywho, that was also racist. So and that's the thing. I always get dragged into this. Every time I went out, they pull me back in. But
Anyway, what are
this,
we talking
of
about today?
course, guys, and thank you for joining our program. We've already started being racist today, as you can see, and we're not racist, guys. I'm just being foolish. But this is our program on the rot in America. Racism, the rot just keeps on giving. And we're going to talk a little bit about it because a lot of people don't want to talk about racism, racist behaviors, racist tropes, racist stereotypes. But we're not only going to talk about it, we're going to kind of perpetuate it a little bit because for me, I don't really care. You can go as far out in the woods as you want to in racism. I welcome it because it's so desensitized to me right now, and I'm so numb to it. It matters not. But imagine a tree standing tall with green leaves, but within a this is America's struggle with racism. A rot spreading from within, even as outward progress appears to bloom. Can we confront the decay, or will it continue to weaken the entire structure? So, I guess my question to you, Luigi, is what do you think racism is? In your perspective, what do you see? What is racism?
It's a good question. Do you mean what is racism in the sense that what is it today? What does it look like today, or just overall?
Well, I mean,
So I feel like those are two
overall,
different questions. Because
those
like
are two different
racism
questions. And let me
is
clarify.
just,
So, what is racism overall? The far reaching
I think,
corners of racism is a structured stereotype or situation that we go through every day in America. What would you say
I
it is?
think, I think racism is just a primal form of like just hatred, and fear.
Yeah,
Not hatred. I don't want to say hatred. I want to say fear, because you
fear.
hate the things
Okay,
that you're afraid of, more
right.
often than not. If you don't understand
Okay.
it and if you're unaware of what it actually is, then you become afraid of it. It's different.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's like the stem of it, and
Hmm.
it's easily cured just by like talking to your neighbors, recognizing that we're all just the same people, different skin, different colors for everybody, different shapes, different sizes.
Hmm.
So
It's true. Now,
th-
just for the record, guys, I'm going to tell you, I'm a Cajun Creole, well, Creole for the most part, but I'm black. I'm a Black American, and in the diaspora, there's a lot of different kinds of Black people, right? From there, Black people in China, Japan, Sweden, Europe that have been there for hundreds of years, thousands of years, if not eons, right? So in my particular heritage, we came over on that boat, not us, but our ancestors came over the boat. We were dropped off, I think, the second or third trip, and I was able to go through genetic and DNA testing and kind of figure out we came through from Virginia, we settled in Louisiana, and we became Creoles over time because of the Spanish and Irish and Indian and African attributes that create what a Creole is. And it says on there 100% Creole for the most part, but it breaks it down pretty good. So I have a lot of Scottish in me, Irish, Sicilian 1%, a lot of Congolese, a lot of Benin, Nigeria, just a whole freaking treasure trove of all kinds of different things. Now, on the other hand, Luigi, of course, because we call him Luigi, and it's not a racist trope. He actually invented that name for himself. So he's a third generation
I did.
Italian. And although we are both in a difference of races, we do experience racism probably in different ways, but it is persistent. Luigi, how do you experience racism in America? Or how have you?
Um, I mean, I'll be completely honest. Racism hasn't impacted my life, at least into where I notice it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Be completely honest with you.
yeah,
I mean, this isn't like a bad thing, but there's often times where like I'm mistaken for someone of like Hispanic descent,
yeah.
and it's funny because like they'll expect me to speak Spanish, especially because my name is Lewis, and it's like nope,
Luis. Well, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So,
So
well, and it's kind of funny because I look at you in my head and I'm like, well, yeah, I can see that because when you tan, I think you almost get as dark as I do when you're tanning. But I think the funny thing is about racism is it's super, super funny. Guys, if you wrap this all up in a pretty little bow, we all are the same kind of human. If you need a kidney and I need a kidney, we can swap those kidneys. Our hearts, if I die and I give my heart, if I was an organ donor, which I am not for a lot of reasons, and those are partly stereotypical racist things that I know in the medical field are true because I've experienced them. That's why I'm not an organ donor. but you can trade your organs out with anybody else who's human. And marking the onset of civilization, everybody came from the sub-Saharan plain, East Africa. So with that being said, in theory, we're all pretty much black. So we're just different shades of black. If you want to go out hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years, but people who are not informed will tell you a whole different story about stuff that really doesn't exist. And that's what perpetuates, I believe, racism in America. Racism's roots in America run deep, originating from the transatlantic slave trade and reinforced by segregation, discriminatory laws, including Jim Crow practices back in the 50s, and enduring institutional biases. Despite the civil rights movement, modern data shows that racial inequities remain embedded in every facet of American life. I mean, yeah, you're speaking to the choir. I knew that already, but it's just funny because a lot of people don't really understand the onset of racism and what makes racism so prevalent today. When you tell children are born non-racist, of course. They don't know. All my friends when I was growing up were white. I mean, everybody I knew was a white kid, and I didn't really interact with black children until I was about 12 or 13, maybe 14 years old. So anything outside my house were white children. And none of them were ever mean or racist to me until I got to high school. And oh my God, the floodgates opened. and I know, Luigi, you don't really have any racist tropes like where they were like mean spirited or they use that advantage to denigrate you or do anything subversive towards you. But do you know anybody that you can say you were around that had some kind of racism that you could see like, oh, that was racist? Aside from myself, 'cause, I like to joke around. But
No, yeah, I understand. I was definitely discriminated against just because I was poor. Like I was definitely picked on quite a bit because
okay,
I was poor, more than anything else. I felt like, and no, I've witnessed quite a few, racist things go down. A lot of it
yeah,
was like, kind of like, like irony or not irony. I'm trying to think of like the karma, like instant karma.
oh
So like
yeah, just
someone saying the N word, and the next thing you know, they're being body slammed. Like
yeah,
things like that.
yeah,
That's about it. Like just like because like I'm thinking like high school in the Marine Corps
yeah.
and the
In high school,
military,
man,
it
high school
really
people,
wasn't.
children are the worst. I remember in high school, when I first learned that I was black and I was different, was around, I will say, elementary school. My teacher, now this is the stupidest thing ever. And I don't know why a teacher would do this, but we're all sitting there, all me and my white friends, we're watching that freaking Disney movie called Skip Titty Doo Da, Skippity A, Lie Oh My, It's a Wonderful Day. I don't remember what it's called, but if you're out there and you've heard this before, let me know. You
That's
can
not Mary
email us.
Poppins, is it?
What's it called?
It's not Mary Poppins, is it?
It's not Mary Poppins. It had a black guy, an older black gentleman, skipping down this little field, singing this song. And then I said, and I had to be like 5. I mean, come on, how am I supposed to know? I said, oh my gosh, look, guys, it's the guy who created Disney. And what the fuck did I say that for? The teacher's like, black people didn't create
Song of the
Disney.
South.
Huh?
Song of the South.
Yeah. Oh, that's what the Song of the South. Look at the Song of the South. And oh my gosh, like I said, what did I say that for? She said black people did not create Disney. And she said he is just an actor. He doesn't own anything. And it broke my heart the way she said it because I felt like she went way past telling me a situation that was true to trying to hurt me with it, like trying to slap me with it. You know what I'm saying? That's what I thought.
Yeah,
And I
it
felt that
wasn't
way.
like she was trying to teach you. It was
No.
just she was more trying to insult you.
She was trying to put me in my place. Like I felt that way. Like I felt like I had done something wrong. And I told my mom, of course my mom got pissed off because she understood what a woman was saying. She was trying to be hurtful, like the black people couldn't own anything. And back then we didn't own much. I'm not gonna lie to you. Things have changed, with the advent of Jay-Z, Michael Jordan, Kobe, and all the big millionaire and billionaires, Oprah Winfrey. That's all new stuff. But back in the 80s, it was way different. Oprah was just starting out. She had already been fired a couple times. Michael Jordan was just starting out. He was just starting to put on some sneakers called Nikes. So back in the 80s, you didn't have much, And the people who were on top in the Black community, we didn't know about them until way later, because nobody would teach you. You always saw white stereotypes on television. There were no leading roles for Black people. There's no one who looked like me on TV. And if they were a servant, they were a maid, or they were a gang member. They were never in the leading role until like freaking Eddie Murphy did a couple of movies where he was the lead and all the cast were Black. That was the first. And people were like, ooh, shit. And they wouldn't even bank on that movie because it's like, no one's going to be able to draw a Black audience. Black people don't go to the movies. This is true. They had these things in the paper. So, so with all that being said, it's just one thing on top of another thing on top of another thing. And you just grew up thinking, yeah, I'm Black and Black is what I am. And that is the extent of it. I'm never going to be anything. I'm never going to go and rise above. You can't be president. You're Black. You're a second-class citizen forever. That's just what I grew up with. But in my life, my mom went to a segregated high school. So she got into a regular high school situation like when she was 6. So it's only one generation from the civil rights movement for me or so. So my mom is still alive. She tells me about this stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I look at the freaking old films of colored water fountain here, colored bathroom there, colored's got to go through the back. My granddad was the number one car salesman in the state of Texas and Las Vegas, Nevada. And he still had to go through the back door to pick up his check. So if that tells you anything you need to know. But in our society, criminal justice, Black offenders receive sentences that are on average 19% longer than those of white offenders for identical crimes. According to the U.S. Sentencing Commission, housing disparities, Black homeownership sits at about 44%, compared to around 74% for white Americans, reflecting long-standing barriers in wealth accumulation and access to loans. Educational inequality. Schools in predominantly Black communities receive about $23 billion less in funding per year than schools in predominantly white areas, as reported by the Ed Bill. And the wealth gap, the inequality with wealth gap. Households have 1/10 of the wealth of white households if you're in a Black household, according to the Federal Reserve. So with all that being said, if you're white passing, like I have a lot of people in my family that actually are white, and they're white passing. And I know you being Italian, you probably didn't know this, but a lot of presidents had wars against the Italians and would hang them just the same way they did the Black people in front of big, huge places like insurance buildings and markets if they even looked at a white woman. Did you know that?
Oh no, yeah, no, I knew that.
Oh yeah, Teddy Roosevelt.
Dark history of America.
Teddy Roosevelt. He had I think it was 22 Italians hung. Not him personally, but in that era, around his presidency, 22 Italian Americans hung because they went into a whites only area, and they were hung for it. And there's countless others. So it's a shared experience with people who aren't seen
Irish too,
as white or Caucasian or westernized enough to where they could fit that bill. And I know you come into contact with a lot of people that you probably know that may have had this stuff go on. But what do you think is a fix for racism? Do you ever think that racism will truly ever be fixed in American culture?
It's hard to say because it really stems from education and like the ability to communicate. Some people just they don't want to be educated. They would rather hate instead of understand and talk. So reaching those people kind of takes like drastic life-changing events that are like thrusted upon them to find the value. So it's tough because the real solution is literally just talking and communicating. We're social creatures, socializing, building a community.
And you're right there, Gigi. There's so many things that bring us together than separates us. If we're being honest, the same things that you like, I like for the most part. Well, not everything, but like the cartoons, anime, reading, culture, socialization, entertainment. So there are notable figures in this. Dr. Ibrahim X. Kendi and Nicole Hannah-Jones are at the forefront of rethinking America's approach to its history and its biases. Through Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist and Hannah-Jones's the 1619 Project, these scholars provide essential frameworks for understanding systemic racism and why acknowledging America's complex history is critical to our future unity. Now, if you're a political person, you know that you have your DeSantis's, who's the Republican governor for the state of Florida. Guy's a complete racist. I don't care. I'm just come out there and say it because whenever you try to deny the public the right to read books about critical race theory or whatever happened historically, that's already been proven. It's already factualized. It's not fake. You're doing this for a reason. Ain't guys, I'll tell you another thing. If you hear someone say school vouchers, run, because that is a predominantly racist tactic to get us back in segregation, where you have a sect part of the elite who get the best education, and then the rest of everybody gets the whatever's left on the table, right? If you hear anybody tell you that, like in college, pretty recently, the Supreme Court went in and struck down affirmative action, but they kept legacy affirmation. So a legacy affirmation for colleges is if your dad and your mom are alumni, you get a better chance of getting into the prestigious colleges, which most people who can get into colleges are people of the elite class. But what I think is happening is racism is kind of like, it's not going away, but it's melting into societal class system because they already know who has what. We're about to enter what's called a golden age, where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And the wealth inequality for both is like the size of a freaking freeway. You've heard of this, right, Gigi? Have you heard about this gilded age we're going back into because of the numbers?
I know there's like a huge wealth exchange right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, that the rich are obviously getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. You can tell just by how the market's going. Things are collapsing like crazy. So
Yeah. So what's happening is the largest wealth exchange in modern history, because everybody who made all the money in the 80s, well, I'll go 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s are at retirement age. So they're getting ready to pass on because, we're biological organisms. That's what happens. And they're going to leave all this money to the next generations or whatever. So you're going to have the largest wealth exchange in the history of America right now. It's going on right now as people are dying and they're leaving people inheritances, and the insurances that they have and all that stuff is getting put into trusts, and it's just going to be money to utilize to keep those families more wealthy. And the only way that that can be stopped is you have to have new entrepreneurship. You have to have new blood in the system, new blood that are all self-made. Because a lot of people in our class systems aren't going to get a part of that money, of course, because that's old money. That money's been passed out for 200 or 300 years. Like, that's just how it happens, and that's why there's such a wealth gap now. So the only way to climb out of that is to forget about racism, in the sense that they're out to get me. You just have to do better. You just have to climb. And I'm not saying, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but you got to find another way in. Would you agree with that? Because we can go ahead and redebate this and litigate this for the next 100 to 200 years. But once that money transfers over, it's going to start all over again. Because racists teach their kids to be racist, because kids don't come up being racist. Like, they don't. They're not racist people. They'll ask you questions because all they know is a certain kind of a functionality and a certain kind of class, because that's just the way they were treated. But they're not racist. But the parents teach them about racism, how to be racist. So if you want to stop it and nip it in the bud, first one thing, like Gigi said, you have to educate people about racism and what it is. Because a lot of people will tell you, when you talk about privileged society, they were like, well, I grew up poor, like just like you. I grew down the street from you. But there's a difference in it. Because if you grew up poor and you try to get a loan or a car or whatever, there are people behind the desks who have been taught about privilege, and they don't believe they're racist. But they are. They'll give you the loan before they'll give me the loan, although we have the same societal statistics. So that's how I believe you can get rid of it. What do you think, Gigi? What do you think about, from your standpoint? How do you make it equal? How do you drop the inequality from our market systems, from our day-to-day lives?
how would you drop it?
Yeah,
It's tough because there's a lot that's rooted through generation.
yeah,
A lot of those old people pre civil rights are there's still a good bit of them in holding government, like holding office
They're the
rather.
most generation right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So it's
baby boomers.
it's tough. Like, what do you do? I feel like as a people, we just have to come together and just realize that we're all in one in the United States and not against each other.
Yeah,
Um, there's a lot of fear mongering going on in the media, so
right now.
it wants to make us hate each other and put us against each other. And in reality, like, you come to find out that even the people who you feel might be the most different from you actually relate to you more than you could like really realize.
Yeah,
But you just have to give them a chance. Just talk to them.
you got to talk to them, guys. I mean, that's and Gigi makes a remarkably very very smart and poignant point. You have to want to do it. you know, you can't just at home and be like, one of these days I'm going to make a black friend and we're going to go to a soul food lunch out or one of these. And I'm one to tell you, racism can go both ways. Okay, I was taught when I was young not to trust white people, blue-eyed devils. I think we've all heard this stuff. They're only out for themselves. They'll get you. Whatever the case may be. It's really not true. I've learned over the years that everybody's the same. Everybody's the same kind of racism, whether you have influence and power or you don't. Now, people will tell you black people can't be racist because we're the oppressed. There's truth in that because racism is it's a structured system like religion or anything else. Anything with an ism is a structured system put in place, right? So racism is a structured system put in place, but we all as a people have to learn to be anti-racist every day. And I had to catch myself doing it sometimes. Sometimes I get on a tangent about this, that, and the other thing. And I got to reel myself back in and be like, damn, James, you went kind of far on that one. But however we do it, we can't do it without each other. America doesn't work without all of us. Whether you be Muslim, whether you be Hindi, whether you be Jewish, whether you be Catholic, or all the different things that divide us and make us the same at the same time. We need all of us to be America. It's not just it's not one person's country or a whole bunch of people's country. It's everyone's country. And racism that's rooted and structured in America, it's got to die. It has to wither on the vine. And the only people that can spray pesticide on that are the American people. We're the only ones that are going to be able to do it. You don't think China's not going to do it? Russia ain't going to do it. We got to do it. And how do we do it? That's a key thing. And Gigi's right. Anybody that's been born past I would say, before the civil rights era, they have a set mentality that's not going to change because it's baked in. It's baked into everything they do. It's not going to ever be different. But let me ask, does discussing racism intensify societal divisions? Or is silence the real threat? Critics argue that constant dialogue may heighten divides, while advocates believe that only by addressing racism at the forefront can America move forward and toward true unity. Is tackling uncomfortable truths necessary, or does it further fragment society? Gigi, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you got to meet it up front. I think the real danger is not talking to each other because that's when you start assuming things, and when you assume things, that's dangerous because then you assume the other people. So it's kind of like the experiment that Joker does in The Dark Knight, where everybody is assuming the other boat's going to blow the boat up, the other boat up. You know what I mean?
Right.
You kind of have to, like, in that case, you kind of have to have like faith in everybody. But when it comes down to it, like, if they could have called over and communicated, that whole situation would have been done right then and there.
Okay.
They would have just been like, hey, let's just not do it. Like, it was two ships full of convicts and prisoners or something along those lines.
Mhm.
Or no, it was, I think one was just a
Was
regular
it
cruise ship. It
convicts
was,
and just regular passengers?
yeah, regular
And
passengers.
then they both had a button, I believe,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
And they beat the Joker because, the romantic side of what you just said, they kind of
Mhm.
played into that. But like, again, if they could have just communicated and just talked to each other, the whole
Yeah.
situation would have been done. The whole idea was that he restricted communication. That's what was going
Yes.
to cause the experience to fail.
See, that's what I love about commentating on things like this with you, is because you'll put it into anime, you'll put it into Super Mario Brothers text, you break it down so that the average everyday person
I do a lot
who's
of
a
drugs
gamer,
and watch a lot of TV. All right.
yeah, they can figure this out. We have the cure for racism. It's within you. That's what the cure is. But racism has staggering economic and social costs. It doesn't just affect the people who are being ostracized and oppressed. Economic impacts. A 2020 report by Citigroup estimated the systemic racial discrimination cost the U.S. economy $16 trillion over the last 20 years. That's half of the debt. That's half of the deficit. As barriers in employment, education, and housing diminish economic growth. So basically, guys, what that means is we could have cured half of the deficit that we face right now, which is almost $32 trillion, if people weren't racist. I mean, you got to break it down into math and numbers that people understand. So they also say that there's health inequalities. Black Americans face twice the maternal mortality rate of white Americans, and they're at a higher risk of chronic illnesses like diabetes and hypertension. According to the CDC, such disparities contribute to a 4.5-year life expectancy gap between Black and white Americans. So what that means is, and this is so okay. So they had a study where they took all these new medical students and they asked them, do Black people perceive pain like white people? And a vast majority of these new doctors who had just got out of med school said, no, Black people don't perceive the same pain as white people. And they asked them, so what would you do if you had a Black client and a white client in the hospital room? They said that they would give the white person more drugs for pain, and they would give the Black person less drugs, like Tylenol, for the same kind of operations, whether it be heart surgery, kidneys, all this stuff, just Tylenol. So there's a lot of work to be done, because if I go get a heart transplant, God forbid, knock it on wood, as you can hear, and someone gives me fucking Tylenol PM, it's going to be a really shitty day in the morning for everybody. I mean, what do you think about that? Gigi, is that the craziest stuff I've ever heard?
Where was this done?
This is in the
survey?
Journal of Health. Yeah.
That's
And it's also talking about where Black women have a higher mortality rate than white women because they believe that Black women can't perceive pain like white women can. That's one of the major reasons for the mortality rate in when it comes to giving birth. And this is all crazy stuff. And this is now. This is in the present time. Our doctors believe the stuff they were taught 200 years ago about Black and white bodies. It's just the weirdest stuff ever. But true reform goes beyond legislation. It involves shifting societal values, investing in health and education, and creating equal economic opportunities to address root causes rather than symptoms. So, I'm not sure how many people out there follow the Supreme Court, but they have had a lot of cases where they're taking away a lot of our protections, and the things that are inalienable rights, like, and just stepping away from racism right now, the right for women to have autonomy over their bodies, that's been taken away and stripped of it. Where do we go in anywhere and rights get taken away that we've already had? They've taken away affirmative action. So now colleges can't say, hey, we're missing about 5 people to make this even within our student body. We got to go get people who have the same kind of intelligence, but are a different race, so we can make those kind of quotas, right? So what does that do? We're already seeing it in the racism take effect in education. Less people that are of color are going to college as of last year when they stripped them of the affirmative action. Why is that? It's not because they're dumb. A lot of people of color are at genius level. I mean, they have these huge IQ scores. Most Black women for like the last 5 years were graduating out of college more so than any other race. But now that's being stymied after the Supreme Court's revocation of affirmative action. All these things have a consequence. So is it getting better? Yes. Are we where we need to be? No, not at all. Especially now with gerrymandering and people being denied simple access to the voting box and to vote, we got a lot of work to do. I mean, Gigi, do you think we still have a lot of work to do?
We definitely have a lot of work to do. With the gerrymandering aspect, you just take a look at Maryland, for example. You have districts that are literally completely connected by a single street. It strings itself through and entwines itself through another district, through a street, and connects them to another district.
Yeah, it's spaghetti that shit.
So it's like,
and you're right.
it
Go
doesn't.
from this street to the 5th Street. They circle around this house. There are houses in neighborhoods that are in completely different districts.
Yeah, and it takes like it makes it so that the representation isn't as accurate. It's not
It's
like it's not
lopsided.
representing. Yeah, it's not representing the accurate wants of the people. It's cherry picking.
Right.
And with affirmative action, that there's a lot that goes into that one.
It's not. Look, affirmative action. I'll agree with you. It was not designed forever. It was, however, designed to get the Black people and people of color just a little bit of a leg so that they could do the basics to rebuild their communities. Without affirmative action, you're going to see a lot of people who I can't get into Harvard. Barack Obama, Michelle Obama. I would tell you, and even Kamala Harris, they all got into these Ivy League schools because of affirmative action, one way or the other. Even Clarence Thomas benefited and used affirmative action to go to college to become a lawyer, later on to become a confirmed Supreme Court justice. And he's the one that put the kibosh on, one of the major ones that put the kibosh on affirmative action. So when you have people like that who talk out of both sides of their mouth and then they forget where they come from and what got them there, and they're supposed to be people who are safeguarding our freedoms, I think that's hypocritical. I think that's a joke. I just do, because he's being paid out. This guy is being paid by wealthy donors to do exactly what they tell him to do. They've bought this guy $1 million houses. They've got send this guy to vacation homes, send this guy on vacations. It's crazy because the justices do not have to report anything like that. And their bosses are the people that have to watch them and maintain them are themselves. You're telling a mouse to stay out of the cheese jar, or you know what I'm saying, or whatever the case may be. Is he gonna do it? I don't think so. But anyway, guys, it's such a complicated, and the reason why we chose this topic is because it is complicated. It does start conversations, and we have to talk about it. We can't just sit here and expect things to be different if no one says anything about it, right? So racism in America is more than a social issue. It's a structural flaw that's woven into the national nation's fabric. Addressing it requires a collective commitment to change, not only for justice, but also for sustainability in our united future. So in conclusion, America faces a critical choice: confront the reality of its past and present a present of the risk that it holds for the future, trapped in different cycles of division. But it's something that we all have to address. It's something that we as a collective need to figure out. We have to have these kinds of conversations, and they're tough conversations, and people don't always agree, but that's the only way we move forward. Thank you for joining us on Let Me Take You Higher, the podcast. We'll continue exploring these hard truths, because the only way to build a more inclusive tomorrow is to understand the roots of today. I've been your host, Mr. Villain. For GiGi Luigi, this has been Let Me Take You Higher, the podcast, and we want to hear from you guys. So email us at letmetakeyouhigherpodcast@gmail.com, or visit us on the web at www.letmetakeyouhigher.com. Thanks again, and always be on the straight and forward. Good night. And that's a wrap on this episode of Let Me Take You Higher, the podcast. Big thanks to our special guests, and a huge shout out to our incredible sponsors. You guys are literally the wind beneath our podcast wings. Remember, this show was dreamed up and brought to life by yours truly, Mr. Villain, and it's all made possible by BC Entertainment LLC, a proud subsidiary of Big Cheddar Music LLC. All rights are reserved by BC Entertainment, so don't even think about touching that dial without permission. Until next time, keep your minds elevated and your vibes higher. This is Mr. Villain signing off. Stay tuned, stay sharp, and stay forever gifted and lifted.
When life storms rage, skies grow dim, we gather trials, we find our might. Let me take you higher toward the light. Let me take you higher beyond the pain. Where broken dreams mend and hope remains. We'll rise from ashes like a phoenix bold. In the symphony of resilience, our stories unfold. When life storms rage and skies grow dim, we gather the shards piece by piece within. Through tears and trials, we find our might. Let me take you higher toward the light. Let me take you higher beyond the pain. Where broken dreams mend and hope remains. We'll rise from ashes like a phoenix bold. In the symphony of resilience, our stories unfold.